Would you say that art for you is about personal expression, or is it about trying to communicate something to others, or something in between that?
I think it's in between that. I think it's, I feel like art or literature or music can be an attempt to organize to organize the world in a good way to put your messy feelings, or not so messy feelings, in a place, in a way that makes sense to you. And I think that part of it can be the personal expression of I'm reacting to all of these elements of me moving through life, and this is how I got to make sense of it, because it honestly doesn't make a lot of sense, grand scale. And if my personal experience and the way that I've organized these thoughts or disorganized these thoughts is helpful to anyone else, I think that's a great thing. And I think if there was a mindset of everybody having some kind of artistic practice, or that was normalized, where it's fine for you to take a few seconds or a couple minutes a day to sit there and doodle and draw or write down what you're thinking, and put it in a place, even if it's not something you share with anyone. I feel like it's pretty therapeutic, and the more you do it, the more it becomes a document of your life, and maybe something in there is going to be helpful to someone else. You can connect with someone that you might never meet and help them out in a way.
Hey, I'm Joe Skinner, and this is American Masters Creative Spark. In each episode, our guest breaks down their creative journey behind a single work of art and the sparks that led them here. Today, I spoke with musician, singer-songwriter, actor, and visual artist Tunde Adebimpe. You might know Tunde's work as the co-lead vocalist for the legendary indie rock band TV on the Radio, a band he's been with for nearly 25 years across 5 studio albums. And Tunde's back now with new music, with his debut solo album, The Black Bolts.
I was thinking about my time in space. I was thinking about the human race in the age of tenderness and rage. Had me kicking through the end of days.
Something about Tunde's work always feels handcrafted and personal. The theme of this episode is going to be DIY, and how a do-it-yourself ethos can start your career, but it can also stick and stay through decades of output.
That's because you're
I love when artists come from a DIY background, the values it instills, and I just want to hear from you, like, what does DIY mean to you?
DIY to me means you can create your own media without the go-ahead from someone established, or just something that seems like a traditional route of media. And for me, I came to DIY culture as a teenager in Pittsburgh, going to, comic stores first, where I first found out about zines. And I was in Pittsburgh, and I found zines that came from Seattle, Pacific Northwest, some from New York, but it was a real punk subculture. So you would find out in these zines about underground bands that you wouldn't find out about otherwise. You would have sort of mail order pages in the back where somebody would send you a tape of their band, and their band would have made 60 tapes, of their basement recording. And you could get those via mail, and you could make your own tapes. And it was kind of could be sort of like a pen pal, circuit nationwide sometimes. But it was just about being able to make your own stuff and finding a community within that of artists and musicians and writers, and basically not being given a go-ahead. Like, you didn't need a publisher or a record label or even a gallery to say, you're qualified to do this.
In the early 2000s, Tunde's band TV on the Radio found success through this model. They came up in the New York indie scene of the era, alongside bands like Yeah Yeah Yeahs, LCD Sound System, and The Strokes. A lot's been written on this period, but needless to say, TV on the Radio was one of the bands bringing back rock at a time when it was thought to be dead.
The first piece of music we put out under the name TV on the Radio, it was just myself and Dave Siddick, and we had met because he moved into a loft I was living in Williamsburg with 10 other people. We were all paying $100 a month because we all wanted to make art and not have regular jobs. But, he moved in and we both discovered that we had a lot in common. We were both painters and we had all of these 4-track tapes of things that we'd made individually, and we'd play the tapes for each other, and eventually decided, we should make a compilation of this, and we got the name TV on the Radio, and we burned maybe 100 CDs and silk screened the covers of these CD covers, and then we went to thrift stores and would hide them in bookshelves and furniture. But that was very much the making 4-track tapes and sending them as a very DIY thing to do, making these copies, burning these CDs.
That first demo album was self-released in 2002. Its title is a play on the Radiohead album OK Computer. It's called OK Calculator. Here's my favorite from that extremely DIY record, called Your God.
Miracle hour, I've got the power, I wanna be your God. 11, 11, I wanna be your God.
When it turned into a job, the thing that might have carried through in terms of ethos was just not caring what a mainstream audience would think, or not even thinking about a mainstream audience, and just kind of making a mess. And if it sounded good to us, that was better than good enough. It was sort of like, this is messy, this is janky, it's got our fingerprints all over it. And I think that was about it, It's and we also, I would art direct art for most of the records, or I would direct videos for us. But it was really this feeling of don't leave anything to anyone else if you can do it yourself.
I love to see how a musician's sonic palette translates to their visual work. Tunde provides art direction across most of the TV on the Radio albums. He has paintings in galleries and even published tour sketches from his time on the road. He even created the artwork for the album cover for this new album, The Black Bolts. I think the marriage that I see often between comics and music is fascinating. I think of Fort Thunder and Brian Chippendale, Lightning Bolt, bands like that.
Yeah.
So I was curious, when you were first exploring comics, who were the major artists you were looking to, and how did that kind of spark your creativity?
Well, I was really, from a young age, was very into superhero comics, and even like Archie and Harvey comics. I lived in Nigeria, and the only comics that we would get there, we would get Marvel and some DC. There were also British comics. I remember there was a comic called The Beano and The Dandy, which were more kind of cartoony. And I remember going to a comic store in Pittsburgh called Phantom of the Attic. And I remember going in one day and there was a comic, an anthology called Drawn and Quarterly. And there were a lot of creators in there who were doing autobiographical comics. An artist named Joe Matt did these autobiographical comics that were really embarrassing, down to, just to his like sexual proclivities and just like how much of a loser and like messed up person he was. And I thought that was really interesting because I didn't know that you could write an autobiographical comic. So that kind of got to me. There was an artist named Maurice Vellecoupe who did these really beautiful watercolor comics, and he's a queer gay artist, And that was, I think, one of my first exposures to just realizing you could use comics to document your personal experience. And, working backwards, I found out about Robert Crumb and Art Spiegelman and Dan Clowes and Chris Ware, and the artists like Phoebe Gleckner and Mary Fleener, just people who really had kind of a punk ethos of, again, like no one's asking for permission, and these weren't like really manicured comics, and you're reading something and you're kind of like, oh wow, people are cursing, and this person's naked, and wow, I can't believe this is this is the comic I have to hide when my parents come in, just like I got to turn down NWA if my parents are walking past the room. It's the same mode. So I loved all of those cartoonists so much, and started drawing comics in high school in that vein, and moved to New York in 1993 and actually took a portfolio of illustrations around. I wanted to work for the Village Voice because that's where most of my favorite cartoonists worked. And I did not, there was no action there. Nobody wanted me. But then, you make your own zine, and I self-published a bunch of comics and found a lot of cartoonists, people whose work I admired, actually would run into them, and you're meeting somebody who's, the cartoonist, when you say you're making a living, it's kind of you're making a living if you have low overhead. But it was a good example of you can do that, and you can work a couple of different jobs, but making your art is the most important thing, because no one's going to do what you're going to do. So anything else can be used to subsidize that.
Well, I think it's interesting. Different art forms kind of engender different work ethics in a way. And with film, you kind of have to work for months or years just to get a project off the ground. But with drawing and illustration, you can just be doing that constantly, or you could do it literally right now and make things. And it's interesting because I feel like you have a rather prolific output, and I'm curious if your work ethic has fallen in line with out of that background in a way.
I think so. I think I just, I was going to say I like to stay busy, but I just don't know what else I would be doing with myself. And I love making art, in whatever form I can make it in. And I've been lucky enough to be able to, kind of do it for a job for a long enough time that I can fall into spaces where people are like, oh, you know how to do this. I'll let you do this, or I'll hire you to do this. And then I go back to zero and panic. And I'm just kind of like, all right, I don't know. And I'm going to figure it out.
As a multidisciplinary artist, Tunde Adebimpe finds a way to keep making art, and sometimes the art finds him. He's spent the last 10 years or so finding success acting in movies and television. You can see him in Twisters, Marriage Story, Star Wars Skeleton Crew, and a ton of voice work. And even though it's been years since TV on the Radio had a proper release, life has been happening, and Tunde has been letting it feed his musical process with his new solo album, The Black Bolts.
I forget who was talking about film in terms of like research and spectacle. I think it was Jean-Luc Godard, but I feel like that applies to, for me, music making. And I feel like the research part is what you're feeling, what you're going through, stories that friends might tell you, world events. And then the spectacle part is filtering that through whatever mechanism you have to present that, or even for yourself, like present it as something that's not so heavy or kind of, damaging to you, and hopefully, you make it attractive enough that someone else, there's an entry point for someone to be like, oh, this is a nice, soft, shiny thing, and then they can get in the middle of it and be like, oh, this is now I can sit or wallow in either the joy or the pain of this. And I feel like with this record, the band had taken a break. And part of the reason for that break is, you start doing something and it's fun, and then it turns into your job, and which you're so lucky to have. I'm so grateful to be able to do that, to have anyone care about anything you're making. I think is you're winning, you know. But the act of writing and then touring and writing and then touring and writing and then touring can be a lot sometimes, especially if your personal life is a little bit rocky, you know, and you can't, it's hard for you to appreciate the good parts of this thing while you're in it. And just in my case, like while things were happening with the band, I felt like every 2 years when the band would have some big success, you know, something would happen in my life that would mitigate that, or sort of like, that's great, but, you know, like my dad died suddenly, or, you know, you put out this record and they're like, record of the year. It's like, but my brother died, you know, suddenly. And this thing happens too. Your bandmate dies. So it's sort of this in between feeling of, I'm so lucky I get to do this and it's all happening and it's wonderful, but I'm really not taking the time that I should take to process any of these things. I'm just kind of, we got to keep going and doing this and doing that. So when we took a break, I suddenly had time to think about all of that stuff and how that had affected me and how I wanted to move in the world. And I found a box full of old 4-track tapes that went from maybe just when I started using the 4-track, probably 1996 up to 2008. And there were some demos of songs that turned into TV on the radio songs. But there were a lot of songs there too that just I hadn't really thought about or done anything with. And I found my old 4-track recorder and actually started working on that again, which is what I did when we started the band, before we started the band. So it was kind of like starting, a bit like starting from zero, kind of, you know, you have all of this experience and you bring that experience back to this very simple way of making music. So that was inspiring. And so got these songs together, wasn't sure what I was going to do with them really. And then I got to another point where I thought, okay, I'm going to take these around. And another part of remembering why I wanted to make music was thinking about, like we were talking about DIY culture, and thinking about the labels that were putting out music that made me want to make music, and these labels that were saying, just do it and we'll put it out. And you're not going to get into Rolling Stone. You're not going to figure it out. We'll do city by city tours. You'll do punk houses, all this stuff. And one of those labels was Sub Pop. And he took the demos to them and they said that they were so down to do it. So that was great. I felt really uplifted by that. And then about a week after I got signed to them and started in earnest working on a record, my sister passed away very suddenly, like out of nowhere. And I had to go and deal with that. And it was sort of still, it was 2021, so it was kind of very pandemic-y still. So I had to go, you know, to where she lived and do the things that you do when someone passes. You have to organize a funeral, you have to meet their friends. And it was incredibly surreal because everybody was masked up. So these friends that I'd seen in photographs I could only see eyes, you know, ceremonies being conducted and you can't see anyone's face. And like many people during the pandemic, had to set up a Zoom funeral for people who couldn't make it, all of this, like a real heavy time. So then I came back and realized, you know, too, I didn't want to do anything. I think anyone who's experienced a loss like that, or just a really fully traumatic, genuinely traumatic experience, you kind of shut down for a bit. But again, this mechanism, like the only way I really know, the healthiest way I know how to process all of those feelings, those messy feelings, these memories, the highs and lows of all of that, is to put it somewhere, you know, and and I owed someone a record. So I kept going. And it's also with all of these people that I've lost, I know that that's what they would want me to be doing, you know, and all of these people who are really like had a big part in making, you know, even making that a thing of me wanting to make art. You know, my dad and my brother and my dear friend and bandmate Gerard and my sister were all great artists, you know, who really believed in how they you could transform yourself and other people through art and music. So I got back to making the record. So, you know, there's a song To My Sister on the record. And I feel like it's personally, it's a, you know, document of a long period of time. Really the, you know, the bliss and the blemish of being a human being and in a certain stretch of time, and just getting it down in a way that to me feels like a gift, you know, in the same sense of the old mixtapes that, you know, my friends would give me or we would trade, where it's just like, here's a bunch of songs I like, here's a bunch of punk songs I like, you know, I'm making, there's enough variation in here to inspire you. And I definitely wanted it to have the feeling of, you know, something you would give to somebody and say, you know, like, how do you, like, find a place for yourself in that. I hope it soundtracks many experiences for you.
Is ILY the song for your sister?
Yeah, it's a song for my sister. Yeah.
I love you with a heart that's pure and true. Came through the shadows like a beacon in the dark. Ever so grateful for the spark. Yeah, I love you.
I started it actually very shortly before she passed away. Was just messing around with some, you know, samples of these guitar arpeggios and singing. You know, not like I usually do, like a bunch of nonsense words and kind of ending it with the set of words that you do have. And yeah, and I love you was the kind of what I landed on every time I would finish a verse. And yeah, then after she passed, it was sort of, you know, I did a lot of writing about her and to her. And again, the feeling that you keep landing on, it's like, despite the fact that her not being here is a real like blows a real hole in your everything, the thing that fills that hole is your love for that person. And it was basically just whittling down to the simplest words that I could. I think it's hard to whittle things down sometimes to their essence, or what you feel is their essence. But I knew that I wanted to have, as I was going into it, something that again anybody could use, and could be, it's personal, you know, to me for the reasons we're talking about, but I wanted it to be simple enough for anyone to be able to use that.
And should tomorrow come and catch us in a lie, I would so gladly fall beside you. Yeah, I love you.
So it sounds to me like your songwriting approach is, your lyrics are leaning into feelings rather than necessarily storytelling. But I'm actually curious about that. Like, you know, when I read your lyrics, it feels pretty impressionistic to me. Are you thinking about music and songs as an expression of a feeling or as a way to tell a story?
I think a little bit of both. You know, I feel like when you extract things from, like, I'll free write a lot, and then just extract things from that make emotional sense to me, even if they don't make any sort of literal sense. So I think it is a bit more impressionistic, and I, in terms of telling a story, I might tell the story to myself, or write down the story, and then try to extract from that something that feels good or sounds good. It can just be rhythmically, or it can crack me up, or just feel like the best feeling is when it feels like you didn't write it. And I've had that feeling with painting, where you get to a point where the painting's telling you what to do instead of you trying to figure out, what should go where. It just starts to fall into place. But yeah, I think it's a bit of both. Like the song God Knows, there's a very specific story to it. And also the song The Most, I think, is maybe the most story-like song on the record. And those are both, one is based on personal, the sillier one is based on a personal experience of just like, you're in a relationship that's just absurd, and both of you know it's absurd and unhealthy, and at the end of it, it's not really a traumatic thing that it's over. It just kind of, it just makes sense.
It took a second to remember that our love was ending. Looking through pictures, trying to figure where you stopped pretending. But I can't waste my precious time hitting on you, baby.
And the other one, a friend's account of being really in love and in a long-time relationship with somebody who had an addiction issue, who was just in a mode where they didn't want to be saved, and was vocal about that, and ended up passing away because of these issues. And she was left in this place where you don't want to speak ill of the dead, but you have a lot of anger towards this person, as well as this, there's such a huge part of your life that you can't just dismiss it, these feelings that are left in you. So the line, God knows you're the worst thing I've ever loved, was kind of, that's her story.
God knows you're the worst thing I've ever loved. And you're bad news, but we still got to have our fun.
I'll give myself a storyline, or visually what this could be. Sometimes I think of it in terms of a film or a short story, and then a song might be bullet points of all of these things.
That's so interesting. I love what you said about whether it's a painting or music, it kind of ends up taking hold of itself and teaching you what to do with it.
Yeah, sometimes it goes from being a feeling-based thing at first, and then you try to refine it into something that makes sense, at least in terms of lyric writing, to me. Just to very simply make sense as a song, and not just someone shouting poetry over a tune and a beat or something, which is awesome, but not what I want to do on to someone else, myself. And then it's you find it to a clearer thought that works as a song, and then for me it can get very technical towards the end, where you just think, well, these are the things that do not need to be here, and these are the things that that work, that I feel like this couldn't really function without, and there are times where you just get rid of entire verses of something because it just doesn't feel right. And I feel like on this record too, more than a lot of things that I've done, I was willing to feel, if there was something in there that made me feel uncomfortable, I kind of left it in. because I don't think it's a good thing to feel too certain about how great something is, you know. Like I don't know if I've ever felt that way, but I feel like on this it kind of I like that parts of it felt kind of janky to me, or parts of it sometimes even there were little, not as much, but felt a little bit cringy to me, that made it onto the record that might not. And that's the experiment too, just like if it comes back to you as someone saying just like, yeah, I didn't really like that, I don't understand why you did that, that's fine too. And also would love, I would never say that to someone's face, but it would be great if someone said, yeah, it was terrible. I didn't really understand that at all, or why you did it.
Well, it sounds to me like you're allowing yourself to feel vulnerable with the album.
Yeah, sure. And I think that's good, you know, because you get it. It's the whole thing of like, you don't want to be too attached, you don't want to be too detached. But I really do feel like on this record and a lot of songs, it was like we were talking about zines and, you know, collage cut-ups, and how, you know, when you hand something to someone, even those mixtapes, when you hand something to someone, it's the imperfections that make it more human, you know, and to me feel like more of a gift, you know, like a handmade thing. Yeah, so even if no one hears that in this, I feel good about that part where it doesn't feel so streamlined to me that it's invisible.
I really like that idea. I mean, that's what's so exciting about DIY, I think, in general, is that idea of like, oh, you can kind of see the glue that's holding the collage in place and the cutouts in place. Mm-hmm. You can kind of see the mess that went into it and the process that went into it, and you kind of leave some of that behind. I think it's a really nice way to make. I think that's kind of why you get into that stuff when you're young too, because it makes it feel like it's possible.
Completely. Yeah, I think it's inspiring. It's an inspiring feeling to pass on to someone, to let them know they can do something, that it's achievable, and that it will be received, you know, in some way. And it's a weird thing. A friend was telling me too about, she was working at a summer camp, and was actually going to teach a sort of DIY class, music and recording and zine making. And she had one of the girls in the class came up to her and said something like, she's like, you mean I don't need to be on American Idol to make a record? And this was a while ago, you know, but the sentiment that you need to be on a talent show on TV before you can get into a studio and make a recording and make a video and have it out into the world. You know, I have a kid, and she sees me making stuff all the time, so she probably will not want to do it because you don't want to do what your parents do. But she just knows it's possible, you know, like I've made zines with her, I've made all of this stuff, but she's, you know, aware that that's a thing. And I feel like it's just very, very important to let people know they're allowed to do something. I feel like a lot of the time when I was younger, you're sort of waiting for the go-ahead for someone. You've got all of these feelings, you know that you've got the desire to make things, but you might not know how to do it, or you're kind of scared that it won't be the right thing, or won't be received properly, or this person won't think it's cool or good enough. But I think really meeting people, you know, and coming to New York and meeting older artists who are just like, do everything. Do whatever. I had an older friend who's sort of a mentor, and I was telling him, I like making animation, I like making comics, I want to make films. This is before I even thought about making music. He just looked at me and said, do everything. He's like, who cares? Just do everything, and you'll find the thing that you like, or you'll just find that you like all of it, and you just keep doing it. Just figure out a way to keep doing it, because that's the best way for your heart and your mind to it becomes this GPS to navigate a sort of chaotic world,
Well, what do you hope people take away from the album?
I hope they find a place for themselves in it. I hope it soundtracks great parts of someone's life, or not so great parts of someone's life. I hope it can provide solace or comfort for someone. I hope it can provide a distraction for whoever needs it. And somehow, I don't know if the feeling of like, you can also do this, I don't know if that feeling makes it out of the record, but it might not be something to say concerning the record, but I want to let everyone know you're loud. You're loud. I said it. Someone said, who said you can do this? Tell them Adam Impey said you could do it. Yeah.
That's a great sentiment to end on. Thanks so much for coming in.
Absolutely. Thank you.